Hi everybody, I'm Sam,
And I'm Jenny.
and we're going to talk about Chapter 9.
At the beginning of Chapter 9, there's the value system of the teacher and culture accommodation. There's a quote, values are beliefs about how one ought not to behave or about some end state of existence worth or not worth attaining. And that was on page 326. There's a lot of talk about values in this chapter and different sections of society for values. One about values of time. There's an example of a mom who puts more importance on braiding her daughter's hair in the morning than getting her daughter to school on time. But then school was upset because she's not putting enough value on the time of being at school. And schools are run on a more time-based schedule than when your mom decides to get you there. And oftentimes at school, the first students that are done with assignments are equated as the more intelligent students, when really they could just be buzzing right through their assignments.
So true. It happens a lot.
There's values about space. How the space in the classroom is set up can change how a student's attitude is. If the students' desks are in straight rows, or if they're in different groups, it makes them more comfortable or uncomfortable. For rites, rituals, and ceremonies, some schools start with different things. You might start with a chant, or start with the Pledge of Allegiance, or you might start with breakfast, or just walking in straight lines into the classroom. So do they come in as they arrive, or do they line up in groups before they come in? There's values about work and leisure. In many cultures, your work status is valued over playing. Your value may be directly related to one's productivity, salary, and job description, is quoted on 329. And the question is the children's playtime structured, such as being in a club sport or going to music lessons, or are they just having free choice play? Values and expectations about education. Based on your culture, students may be uneasy about interactions in class. They might be more nervous about answering questions or being asked to involve in things and participating in demonstrations. Values about roles and status. Roles in the community vary among cultures. In Vietnamese culture, ranking is first the king, then the teacher, and then the father, which is a lot different than what is in the United States. So what a student thinks about the possible roles that they could play will affect their performance. Values about your occupation. Some value high-paying jobs, where other cultures value inherited status.
And even within some of these things, it seems like there's a lot of variation. We can't just generalize all of these things. I like this story on page 330 that talked about how the teacher knew that the students' culture did all kinds of healing ceremonies, and he just kind of assumed that the family might do that. And actually, when he talked to them, he found out that they just went to the hospital and got antibiotics. So we need to be aware of these things, but we also, I guess, help them to adapt and maneuver in the new place that they are, right?
Right. One value about child rearing, it's a question of who takes care of them and the amount of supervision that there are. Are they always near a parent? Are they allowed to play out in the yard, in the backyard, in the front yard, leave the house with friends? How much freedom they have? Do you just need to be back by a certain time, or do you need to know every little thing? And what they are expected to do with child rearing affects their behavior in the classroom when they start facing new expectations from the teacher. And then the next section about educating students about diversity, that teaching about various diversities and students' perspectives. Teaching about various diversities widens their students' perspectives. There's different ways you can add culture to your classroom, different activities to add to make it more multicultural. In the table 9.1, it tells us that we could invite guest speakers to our classroom. You can teach the kids folk dances, go on different field trips to different places that will illustrate what they're learning about. Students can bring in show and tell items from different cultural things. You could read fables, folk tales, and legends, or other books about other cultures. One note, though, that they said about reading books about other cultures is to be careful to pre-read it, because there's a lot of books that look like they're multicultural, but they end up having a lot of racist or...
And actually, it's not too hard to do those things if you just take a few minutes to do it. Usually, I can find someone in my class who is connected to someone from whatever culture it is that I might want to bring in as a guest speaker. And guest speakers have been big hit in 3rd and 4th grade, and I would imagine for other ages too. It really brings whatever you're studying to life, and they always bring in their own artifacts to show to the class, and that really brings it all to life. It's fun to learn about different cultures when the teacher is also enthusiastic about it.
Yes. It's also fun that you can organize a pen pal system with students in another place. You can either use Skype or another form of that, or you can actually write paper and pencil letters to other students. And then they can also read magazines about other cultures.
Yes. And cut and paste. That's always fun. Cutting
Yes.
and pasting with about different cultures and trying to make a collage. There's all kinds of fun things you can do. It's just finding the time and making the time to weave it in, and doing the lesson plan that we're doing in class and the essay that we wrote. It helped me see that even if you have to teach certain things about America, you can always add in another culture that you're comparing America to, or that maybe compare isn't the best word, but if you're looking at one aspect of America, look at that same aspect of the other culture that you also want to highlight that day.
Yes. And by validating students' different cultures, it promotes their self-esteem and better self-image, which leads to better learning and better language acquisition when they have less anxiety.
Wow. Yeah, that first section had a lot in it and a lot of interesting topics to consider and think about. I know that something I kept thinking about was, I guess besides just the issue of values, is how to balance those values of other cultures with truly preparing these kids to live in this culture and to be successful in this culture. So I guess that's something that we have to continue to educate ourselves about and learn about how to best do that. For example, if in the primary or the original culture, maybe women are not treated very well or treated as second-class citizens, well, in America, girls and boys sit together in the classroom. So navigating those kinds of things, is important too. And I wanted to bring up being a culturally supportive classroom, which is pretty much what we've been talking about this whole course that we've been taking, and having high expectations for all students. So again, the book goes back to the teacher, and I know that the teacher makes the difference, sets the tone, right? And it does mention that students' responses to teacher expectations seems to be highly influenced by cultural background and the home. And you mentioned that too. There's so many things that come from the home, whether you're a second language, it's your second language or your first language, right? So that connection with the home, the teacher, the school-home connection is so important. Let's see what else I want to do. So we're at 10 minutes. Okay. Okay, speaking of home and the parents and the school communicating, there's a table on page 350, table 9.5, about that two-way communication. and teachers and parents contacting with each other and bringing those parents in as best you can, communicating with them as best you can. If you can get them face to face once in a while or into the classroom, I think that's wonderful. One of the stories in the book mentioned how a child was being made fun of for her name, and so the parent came in and actually did a lesson on that language and on the name. And funny, I had a Korean mother who came in and did the same thing. And the kids were so excited to learn their Korean name. She wrote them on the board, she taught them the Korean alphabet, and she brought some Korean snacks for them. And later in the year, because that went so well, later in the year she made a lunch for all of us to have together, to have Korean food. And it worked out so wonderfully. Everyone learned so much more and was so much more open and understanding towards each other.
Sounds like a really nice mom.
It was wonderful. So the table 9.5 and the one for box 9.1 across from it just talks about a lot of common sense that you would do with any students and parents, and especially parents that are coming from other cultures. So being sensitive to that and taking the time to connect with them really goes a long way and can really precipitate problems that might come up later if you don't. So it's best to reach out to them and do everything you can to bring them in or to communicate with them. And finally, in the chapter, it talks about teachers being aware of their own learning styles and their own values. And so I encourage teachers to, and myself, to have more balance and to also take time for yourself and to enjoy the cultures that are in our lives, in our personal lives too. Getting out there in the arts, in the cultures, and always learning ourselves for enjoyment, not just for the classroom, but for life.
Yes.